Starting anybody but Shedeur Sanders is dumb. Deshaun Watson, I understand, is there. He's played 19 games in 6 years. In that span, it's also shoulder surgery on his throwing arm and Achilles surgery. Figure out what you have in the NFL, and they haven't for years. They're building a new stadium. When you build new stadiums, unless you have a young quarterback, it doesn't matter how good your football team is. Playing Deshaun does nothing for your future. Literally nothing.
100%
It's only
agree.
about maybe in November.
Dan Orlovsky has finally done what a lot of Browns fans thought would never happen. The same analyst who spent most of last season picking apart every questionable decision Shedeur Sanders made, on and off the field, is now standing in front of an ESPN camera telling Cleveland to hand him the keys to the offense. This is the guy who tore into Sanders for his mime routine with reporters, who questioned his maturity, who wondered out loud whether the rookie was even helping himself in his own locker room. And now, with training camp about to open, Orlovsky is the one pushing hardest for Sanders to be named the starter over Deshaun Watson. If you've been following this quarterback battle at all, you know how big of a turn this actually is.
Figure out what you have, two of them with Shedeur Sanders. You have 2 first-round picks next year. At some point, you've got to look at that young player, see if he's even the potential of being your future, because what are you going to do? Deshaun, and he plays well, and then you're going to pay him again? Shedeur Sanders should be the starting quarterback in Cleveland.
On Monday's episode of Get Up, Orlovsky didn't hedge at all. He said starting anyone but Shedeur Sanders would be a dumb decision for this franchise to make. That's about as direct as it gets from someone who built a reputation last year as one of Sanders' toughest critics in the media. Orlovsky laid out his reasoning in plain terms, saying the Browns need to figure out what they actually have in Sanders while they still have the chance, because the clock on evaluating him properly is ticking. He pointed to the fact that Cleveland is sitting on 2 first-round picks next year, which gives them the flexibility to build around a young quarterback without the same pressure a normal roster would feel. According to Orlovsky, that's exactly the kind of situation where a team should be finding out if their day 3 rookie who made the Pro Bowl has real franchise potential, rather than running it back with a 30-something veteran who has barely been able to stay on the field. That brings us to the other half of his argument, which is really where things get interesting. Orlovsky didn't hold back on Watson either. He brought up the fact that Watson has played in only 19 games over roughly 6 seasons in Cleveland, a stretch riddled with a shoulder procedure and, more recently, back-to-back Achilles tears. In Orlovsky's eyes, that track record alone should be enough to make the Browns hesitant about handing him the job by default. His bigger question was about what happens next. If Watson comes back healthy and plays well, is Cleveland just going to pay him again after everything that's already happened financially with that contract? Orlovsky seems to think that path leads nowhere good, and that the only way forward that actually makes sense is finding out what Sanders can do with a real opportunity in front of him. He's not saying Watson can't still help this team. He's saying the Browns can't keep making decisions based on what Watson used to be instead of what he realistically is right now. Here's the thing people need to understand about this moment. Dan Orlovsky doing a complete 180 on Shedeur Sanders is not something that happens easily, and it definitely isn't something he's done quietly in the past. Go back through Orlovsky's commentary from last season, and you'll find one critical breakdown after another. Most of it wasn't even about Sanders' play on the field. It was about how he carried himself off it. When Sanders lost the starting job to Dillon Gabriel and responded to reporters by pantomiming his answers instead of actually speaking, Orlovsky was one of the loudest voices calling it a mistake. He said flat out that there's no time or place for a quarterback to act like that, reminding everyone that every single thing a player does in that position functions like an ongoing job interview. He specifically asked whether that 30 or 40-second stunt actually helped Sanders inside his own building, with the people who were deciding his future. That wasn't a throwaway comment either. Orlovsky kept building on it, saying that as a late-round pick, everything Sanders does has to be viewed through the lens of making himself more appealing to the people who could give him a real shot. That's a pretty pointed message to send about a rookie quarterback, and it stuck with a lot of Browns fans who felt like Orlovsky had officially soured on Sanders for good.
And my question to Shedeur would be, are you helping yourself in your own building? Did that 30 or 40 seconds help you in your own building when it comes to what they think you can be in the future? And then did you help yourself outside of your own building? There's 64 jobs essentially at that spot in the NFL. Did that 30 or 40 seconds help you at all when it comes to your future there or your future elsewhere? Do you think an owner or a general manager or a president or somebody making decisions is watching that going, I want that guy leading my franchise?
Yeah.
So how do you go from that kind of criticism to standing on national television saying Sanders should be the guy under center in Cleveland? The answer traces back to what's actually happened on the practice field this offseason. Multiple reports out of Berea have described Sanders closing the gap with Watson throughout spring practices, to the point where new head coach Todd Monken openly said he felt like he had 2 starting caliber quarterbacks on his roster. That's not a small statement from a coach who has every incentive to stay neutral in a competition like this.
His progressions, getting the ball out, his understanding of concepts, I think he's really come a long way.
The defense was able to have a couple heads up.
Sanders and Watson reportedly split first-team reps all spring, and instead of Watson simply reasserting his status as the clear frontrunner, Sanders held his ground. Add in the fact that Sanders made the Pro Bowl as a rookie last season after going 3-4 in his 7 starts, and you start to see why the conversation around him has genuinely shifted. This isn't a rookie riding hype anymore. This is a second-year quarterback with real tape, real production, and a coaching staff that isn't ready to just hand the job to the veteran without a fight. Now, here's where it gets a little more interesting if you step back and look at the bigger picture. Orlovsky spent a huge chunk of last season as one of the more vocal skeptics of Sanders, and a lot of that criticism landed on him from Sanders' own fan base, and even drew a response from Deion Sanders himself after an earlier draft night take. Orlovsky has watched this Shedeur Sanders storyline evolve in real time, from a polarizing prospect who slid out of the first round to a rookie who got benched and mocked for his sideline antics, to a player who is now genuinely competing to be the face of an NFL franchise. Whether Orlovsky wants to fully admit it or not, this looks a lot like someone trying to get ahead of a wave before it crashes. If Sanders wins this job and goes on to have the kind of season that validates everything his supporters have been saying for 2 years, the analysts who spent the most time doubting him are the ones who are going to face the most backlash. Jumping on board now, right before training camp opens, and right before we find out who Monken actually picks, is a way for Orlovsky to insulate himself from that criticism if Sanders does end up balling out. It's a much safer position to be in as an analyst. Whether this is genuine conviction based on what he's actually seen from the film, or a calculated move to avoid getting caught on the wrong side of history again, only Orlovsky really knows. What makes this shift even more significant is what's actually been happening on the practice field, and this is where Mary Kay Cabot's reporting becomes so important. Cabot has been tracking this quarterback competition closely all offseason, and her recent updates paint a picture of a Shedeur Sanders who has genuinely earned this new wave of support. She explained that Sanders came on really strong during OTAs and minicamp, and that when the pressure was on, he rose to the occasion and delivered.
Well, that's because of Shedeur Sanders and what he did about this whole thing. He came on really strong in OTAs and minicamp, and when the chips were down, he rose to the occasion and he brought it. And if he continues to do that during training camp, then he's going to continue to make this decision very, very difficult.
So why is this happening with 2 respected voices at basically the same time? It comes down to the tape and the trajectory. Analysts and insiders who watch this stuff for a living don't ignore patterns like that, and both Orlovsky and Carter are clearly reacting to a body of evidence that's hard to argue with at this point.